Anna's story didn't begin with wealth or luck. At 31, she already knew the harshness of nights without a roof and days without bread. Her face, marked by fatigue, carried the story of someone who had been battling life from an early age. But nothing hurt her more than the hunger reflected in the eyes of little Lucas, her 4-year-old son. He was as light as a feather in her arms, yet every tear he shed felt like the weight of the entire world on her shoulders. Everything Anna owned fit into a single torn bag, 2 changes of clothes, a thin blanket, an old photograph. Nothing more. It was a cloudy winter afternoon, the cold wind cutting through her skin, when courage overcame shame. Walking through the silent streets of an affluent neighborhood, she found herself in front of an imposing, high iron gate protecting a mansion that seemed untouchable. Lucas' stomach growled, and with each sound, Anna's heart tightened. She took a deep breath, looked at her son, and thought if I do nothing today, there might not be a tomorrow. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorbell. The press echoed inside her like a thunderclap. The silence that followed felt even crueler, as if the whole world were judging her in that moment. Every second that passed, Anna fought the urge to run, to hide again in the shadows. But then she looked at Lucas, lying in her arms, his lips dry and eyes lost, and found the strength to stay. The gate creaked open slowly, allowing space for uncertainty. And it wasn't a security guard, nor a housekeeper, who appeared. It was him, Eduardo, a 40-year-old man, tall, wearing expensive clothes, owner of a chain of restaurants, and ironically, one of the loneliest men in the city. His gaze was cold at first glance, but there was something hidden behind that serious expression, something Anna noticed the instant their eyes met loneliness. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Anna felt her heart hammering in her chest. Words seemed to refuse to come out, yet necessity outweighed pride. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse, almost a whisper. "I can clean your house, wash laundry, anything. I just need a little food for my son." And then she lowered her head, consumed by shame, feeling tears burn her eyes. Eduardo watched silently, his eyes alternating between Anna's worn face and the child sleeping in her arms. It was a gaze far too long, almost uncomfortable. She thought she would be rejected, humiliated, maybe even thrown out, but instead, the response was unexpected. "Your son is sleeping?" Anna lifted her eyes, confused. "Yes." Sir Eduardo took a deep breath, looked away as if gathering strength from somewhere, and finally stepped aside. "Come in." "Wait in the kitchen." Anna froze. For a moment, she thought she hadn't heard correctly. "You're telling me to come in?" "Yes." "Come in." The firm tone left no room for doubt. Her heart raced. Fear screamed that it could be dangerous to trust a stranger, but hunger and cold screamed louder. And so, with slow steps, she crossed a gate she had never imagined would open for someone like her. The mansion's hallways were eerily silent. The marble floor shone as if touching it were a sin. Every golden detail, every framed painting on the walls, seemed to shout the chasm between her and this place. Upon reaching the kitchen, she carefully placed Lucas in a chair and remained standing, unsure, as if sitting were a privilege she didn't deserve. Eduardo glanced at her and said, "You may sit." "I don't bite." She sat, hands clenched in her lap, trying to hide the shame of her tattered, dirty clothes. The silence seemed endless until he placed a hot plate on the table. It was soup, simple for those accustomed to luxury, but to Anna it seemed a feast. "This is for your son. Feed him first," Eduardo said, averting his gaze. Anna didn't need to be told twice. With tears streaming down, she began feeding little Lucas, who devoured every drop as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Eduardo watched, and something inside him broke. It wasn't just compassion. It was memory. The scene awakened ghosts of a past he had struggled to forget. He remembered his mother, years ago, going door to door with him in her arms, begging for work and being rejected. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to contain the memory, but it was impossible. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to disguise the emotion. "Anna, and his is Lucas." Eduardo exhaled deeply. "Why did you come here?" She sighed, looking at the empty plate. "Because I have nowhere else to go. I have no one to ask." Her voice faltered, but there was no lie, only the raw truth. Eduardo felt a lump in his throat and, on an impulse he didn't fully understand, said, "Starting tomorrow, you will work here." Anna's eyes widened. "But I don't have documents. No references you have courage." "That's enough." She couldn't hold back the tears. "I don't know what to say, just accept it. Well, start tomorrow morning. You'll have a room, food, and a salary." "Why? Why are you doing this?" Eduardo stared at the ceiling for a few seconds. Childhood memories flooded back, and he spoke softly, almost like a confession, "Because one day my mother asked for food, and no one opened the door." The words hit Anna like a punch. It wasn't just charity. It was something deeper. She cried silently, but this time not out of despair, but hope. That night, for the first time in months, she and Lucas slept in a real bed, warm, safe, without fear of tomorrow. Eduardo, sitting alone by the fireplace, couldn't get the image of that woman and child out of his mind. He tried to convince himself it was merely an act of kindness, but he knew it was more. She had awakened something. He had kept buried the memory of his own pain. The next morning, Anna woke, still in disbelief. The room where she and Lucas slept was simple by the mansion standards, but to her it felt like a palace. The soft mattress, clean sheets, and gentle warmth of the room made her cry quietly before getting up. She didn't want to wake her son, who slept with a light smile, perhaps the first in a long time. When she went down to the kitchen, Eduardo was already seated, drinking coffee, with his usual serious expression. He looked up when he saw her, but didn't speak immediately. He just gestured toward the table, where there was bread, milk, and fruit. Anna hesitated. Part of her still thought she was dreaming, that at any moment someone would appear to expel her. But seeing Eduardo's steady gaze, she realized it wasn't a dream. She sat slowly, whispered a thank you, and began to eat, though still weighed down by shame. Every bite felt like a debt she could never repay. After breakfast, Eduardo explained practically, almost coldly, "You'll help with cleaning, organizing some things, and tending the garden in the back. Don't worry about Lucas. He can stay here. There's space, leftover toys for my nephew. Nothing will be missing." Anna nodded, not daring to question. Everything seemed too generous. In the first days, she worked tirelessly. She cleaned diligently, as if making every corner shine was a way of showing gratitude. Eduardo watched from afar, saying little, but inside he felt something unusual. This quiet, dedicated woman brought a different energy to the house, what had once felt like a mausoleum. For the first time in years, the sound of children running through the hallways echoed. Lucas' laughter filled the walls, and Eduardo, even trying to hide it, felt less alone. But with this new rhythm came questions. Who was Anna really? What had led her to the point of knocking on his door? Eduardo tried to ignore his curiosity, but couldn't. At night, while she slept, he found himself examining the simple items she had brought: a worn blanket, old clothes, a photograph of an unknown family. There was a story there, and he wanted to know it. One evening, after dinner, he finally asked Anna, "What happened to you? Where's the boy's father's family?" She lowered her eyes. The long silence revealed an open wound. "I had a simple but happy life. My husband, he got sick too soon. The treatment was expensive, and I sold everything I had to try to save him. In the end, I had nothing and know him." Her voice trembled, but she continued then, "I tried to find work, but with a small child and no one to help, doors closed one by one, until there was nowhere left." Eduardo wasn't expecting to hear something so harsh. He felt uneasy because her pain mirrored his own, different in details, but the same in essence. Both had known loss and abandonment. He wanted to say something, but couldn't. He simply walked to the window and stared at nothing. Over time, their relationship began to change. It wasn't an open friendship, nor just an employer-employee connection. It was subtle, made of silences that spoke louder than words. Eduardo realized he began to eagerly anticipate the moments when Lucas ran to him to show a drawing or asked to be lifted. Anna, despite trying to keep a respectful distance, felt a security she hadn't experienced in a long time. But life rarely allows peace to last forever, and the first threat came from where Anna least expected: whispers. The neighborhood, used to Eduardo's coldness, began noticing the presence of a poor woman and her son inside the mansion. Rumors emerged she was taking advantage of him. She had ulterior motives. She was after his money. And these rumors reached Eduardo's ears, carried by an old business acquaintance. One night, after hearing heavy insinuations at dinner, Eduardo returned home disturbed. He found Ana in the kitchen washing dishes and couldn't contain the doubt that had been growing inside him. Ana, have you ever thought about using this place to your advantage? To take advantage of me? The words sounded harsh. Even though he didn't mean them that way, Ana immediately dropped the dish, surprised as if slapped. Tears filled her eyes, which she tried to hold back. I didn't ask for anything, Mr. Eduardo. I only asked for food for my son. I never wanted more than that. If you think I'm here for selfish reasons, I can leave right now. Her voice was firm, yet heavy with pain. In that instant, Eduardo realized his mistake. The silence that followed was suffocating. He felt shame not for her, but for himself for letting outside voices contaminate what was growing inside. He slowly approached and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I am just not used to trusting anyone." Ana exhaled deeply, wiped her tears, and replied, "I understand, but know that my gratitude is priceless. Even if you sent me away, I would still thank you every day for what you've done for my son." That night, Eduardo couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, recalling her words. It wasn't about interest. It was dignity. It was strength. And that moved him more than he cared to admit. The following days were marked by more silence, but also by subtle closeness. He began opening up gradually, sharing fragments of his own story, the absent father, the mother who died too soon, the years he was treated as invisible until he built his fortune alone. Ana listened quietly, but in her eyes there was something Eduardo had never seen before understanding, and it was in one of those moments of sharing that something unexpected happened. Lucas, playing on the living room floor, suddenly stopped and looked at Eduardo with the innocence only a child can possess. "You could be my dad, you know?" Eduardo's heart raced. Ana was speechless, her face flushing with embarrassment. She tried to correct her son, but Eduardo simply smiled a shy, rare smile. "And why do you think that, little one?" Lucas shrugged, as simple as only children can be. "Because you take care of us." The words hung in the air, heavy with a truth no adult would dare speak. Yet there it was clear, undeniable. Ana lowered her eyes, but deep down, she knew this was a turning point that would change everything. That night, after Lucas went to sleep, Ana stayed awake for a long time. The boy fell asleep quickly as usual, but she couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. In her heart, a mix of fear and hope, fear that Eduardo might misinterpret the child's innocence, hope that perhaps there really was something more than gratitude between them. But she didn't allow herself to dream. She was used to seeing dreams collapse before they were born. Eduardo, in turn, couldn't find rest either. The innocent comment from Lucas seemed to open an old wound and, at the same time, a door he had never dared to open. He spent hours revisiting memories he had tried to bury his fatherless childhood, the solitude that accompanied him even after achieving everything he wanted. Somehow, that boy was giving him the title he had always longed for and never received. In the following days, the atmosphere at the mansion changed visibly. Where silence once reigned, there were now laughter, voices, and little messes from a child. Eduardo was no longer the solitary millionaire, and Ana was no longer the woman who had once knocked on his door in fear and shame. Together, they had built something greater than wealth. They had built a home. But life, as always, had its tests. One rainy afternoon, while Ana was helping Lucas with his homework, the doorbell rang. When Eduardo opened the door, he was confronted by a man he didn't recognize, but who seemed to know far too much about them. The man, with a hard gaze and a mocking smile, said bluntly, "I'm looking for Ana. I heard she's living here now, with the rich boss." Ana froze at the sound of the voice. The plate in her hands nearly slipped. It was Roberto, an old acquaintance of her late husband, a man who in the past had offered help but later revealed only selfish intentions. He knew too much about her history, and there was a threatening tone in his voice. Eduardo noticed the panic on Ana's face and immediately stepped in front of her like a shield. "What do you want?" he asked firmly. Roberto shrugged, but the cynical smile didn't fade. Nothing much. I just came to remind your new employee about some old debts. Let's just say her husband didn't pay me certain things, and now someone has to pay. Anna felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Memories came rushing back like knives, the desperate loans her husband had taken to buy medicine, the abusive interest, the veiled threats. Roberto had never truly disappeared. He had just been waiting for the right moment to resurface. And now, seeing her in a mansion, probably safe, he likely thought he could exploit her again. But Eduardo was not intimidated. You're not taking anything from anyone here. Leave before I call the police. Roberto laughed, as if hearing a good joke. Police? Do you think I'm scared? I know very well you want a scandal. But think carefully. Doctor, this kind of people only bring trouble. Today it's one debt. Tomorrow it's another. You'll see. And with that he left, leaving a tense atmosphere behind. Anna collapsed in the kitchen, crying silently. Eduardo approached cautiously, placing a hand on her shoulder. Was he telling the truth? Are there really debts? Anna shook her head desperately. No, my husband did borrow money, yes, but we already paid it all back. Roberto is just a manipulator. He's always been. He only wants to use the misery of others to gain power. Eduardo believed her, but he also felt the threat looming. This family had suffered enough. He wouldn't allow anyone else to take advantage. He decided that if necessary, he would use every resource he had to protect Anna and Lucas. Yet inside her, doubt consumed Anna. What if Eduardo got tired? What if he thought her presence brought only problems? This insecurity made her withdraw again. In the following days, she avoided talking much, staying busy as if to prove she was worth having there. Eduardo noticed, and it made him uneasy. One stormy night, the tension exploded. Eduardo found Anna in the garden, standing alone in the rain, trying to calm herself. He approached, getting wet as well, and asked, "Why are you distancing yourself from me? Do you think I don't notice?" She, with tears mixing with the rain, answered, "Because I'm afraid. Afraid that one day you'll regret opening the door. Afraid you'll see only a woman who brings problems." The words hit Eduardo like a punch. He held her face gently, but firmly. "Anna, listen. When you rang that bell, you didn't bring problems. You brought life. You brought meaning. I don't regret anything, and I won't regret it." The silence that followed was broken only by distant thunder. They looked at each other, and something changed in that instant. It was no longer just gratitude. It was no longer just kindness. It was something deeper, something they tried to deny, but now could no longer ignore. Inside the house, Lucas watched through the window, smiling without fully understanding, but feeling that something good was happening. For him, this was already a family, even if no one dared say it out loud. The following days were marked by a tension that hung invisibly in the air. Even after the rain and the conversation in the garden, Anna couldn't relax. She tried to convince herself of Eduardo's words, but the shadow of Roberto lingered in her mind. And indeed, he hadn't come for nothing. A week later, just as the sun was barely rising, Eduardo received a call from an unknown number. He answered instinctively and heard the same man's ironic voice. "I hope you're taking good care of your new family. It would be a shame if something happened to them, wouldn't it? The world is dangerous." Eduardo's blood ran cold. He replied firmly, "If you lay a finger on them, you will regret it bitterly." But Roberto just laughed and hung up. From that day, Eduardo doubled the mansion security. He installed cameras, reinforced the gates, briefed the staff. But he didn't tell Anna. He wanted to spare her the fear. Still, she noticed his unease and gradually understood something was happening. One afternoon, while preparing dinner, she heard a noise outside. Lucas was playing in the garden, but she noticed a shadow near the wall. She rushed out and found a folded note on the ground by the gate. With trembling hands, she picked it up and read, "Debts don't disappear. They are paid with money or with pain." Anna felt the world spin. Her maternal instinct kicked in. She ran to Lucas, hugging him tightly, as if to protect him from the very air. Eduardo arrived shortly after and saw the note in her hands. The silence between them was heavy, but inevitable. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. He sighed deeply. Since that day at the door. I didn't want to worry you. Tears streamed down her face. You should have told me. I can't risk my son's life. Maybe it's better if we leave. Eduardo held her by the arms, looking firmly into her eyes. No, you're going nowhere. This house is yours now, too, and I won't let a coward decide the fate of our lives. That night, Eduardo contacted his lawyers and associates. He discovered that Roberto was involved in various loan shark schemes and minor crimes. Though nothing had been proven, he decided that if the law didn't act, he would personally put an end to it. 2 days later, Roberto appeared again. He didn't ring the bell. He knocked forcefully on the gate, shouting Ana's name. Eduardo immediately came down, accompanied by 2 bodyguards. He opened just enough to confront the man. You are not welcome here. Consider this your warning, he said. Roberto laughed. A warning? You think money buys everything? This woman will pay me what she owes, even if it's with what she treasures most. Before he could say more, Eduardo stepped forward, his voice deep and commanding. The only thing you will get is the police on your tail. I already have enough evidence of your crimes. And if anyone approaches Ana or Lucas again, I will personally make sure there's no place for you to hide. Roberto tried to maintain his composure, but for the first time, he wavered. The bodyguard stepped closer, and he realized he had no advantage there. He muttered a few threats and left, but the confidence was gone. Ana, watching from inside the house, broke down in tears. When Eduardo returned, she ran to him, unable to hide her emotion. Why are you doing all this for us? You owe me nothing. He breathed deeply and replied almost in a whisper, because I need to. Since you came here, I am no longer the same man, and I don't want to go back. It was the first time Eduardo clearly let slip how much she meant to him. Ana tried to speak, but her voice failed. She simply hugged him, and in that embrace was more than gratitude. There was surrender, recognition, and love quietly growing. The following days were different. Roberto didn't return. The threats ceased. Eduardo maintained vigilance, but now could breathe a little easier. Ana, for a part, began to allow herself to dream. She still feared the future, but she no longer saw Eduardo only as an employer or protector. She saw him as part of her life, someone who, unknowingly, had become essential. Lucas, innocent and spontaneous, was the purest reflection of this transformation. One evening, while having dinner together, he looked at Eduardo and said with childlike simplicity, Dad, can you tell me one more story before bed? Ana widened her eyes, unsure how to react, but Eduardo smiled. I sure can, son. The word hung in the air, echoing stronger than any promise. Ana watched the two and felt her heart warm. She didn't correct the boy. For the first time, she didn't fear that this illusion would break, because it was no longer an illusion. It was the reality beginning to form before them. Months passed, and the mansion never returned to what it had been. Cold corridors were now filled with laughter, conversation, and the small chaos of a child. Eduardo was no longer the solitary millionaire, and Ana was no longer the woman who had knocked on his door in fear. Together, they had built something greater than wealth a home. On a sunny afternoon, in the garden where everything seemed to bloom, Eduardo found the courage. The three of them were together, watching Lucas chase butterflies. He approached Ana, gently took her hand, and asked, Do you still feel like you're just passing through here? She smiled, eyes glistening with tears. No, this is my home. Eduardo took a deep breath. Then, let me be part of it with you. Not as a boss, but as family. Ana couldn't hold back her tears. She hugged him tightly, while Lucas ran to join them. In that instant, all fears lost their strength. What remained was the certainty that life had given them a second chance. And so, the woman who once knocked on a door asking for a single meal gained so much more. She gained a home, love, and a future. And the man who believed he had everything discovered that he was truly rich only when he found someone to share it with. If this story touched your heart, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it. Comment below, do you believe a simple gesture can change destinies? Because sometimes all we need is the courage to open the door.